Howdy, everyone. Welcome to Cyber Judo. I'm Christian Scott, your host, and I'm joined by my wonderful co host, Travis DeForge. Tonight, we are going to be talking about social engineering techniques. If you're wondering why you don't see my lips move,
That's because it's a social engineering technique impersonating my voice. And so tonight we're going to be jumping into not just social engineering techniques, but also some open source intelligence gathering tips and tricks and all that kind of stuff. We're going to be talking about some of the sophisticated attack vectors that malicious actors employ when they're targeting organizations and individuals. And we're not just joined by Travis here, but also Michael Hallman, Dan Piazza, and Dennis Carlson. And that parlor trick that you just saw a moment ago is very much because of Dennis, because he has stolen my voice. So he has taken my voice, he has stolen my voice from the Cyber Judo videos, and he's used generative AI, and now he can just say anything that I say. So we're going to talk a little bit about the fun of that and how he was able to achieve that. We're also going to, again, be covering a lot of other elements across the domains of open source intelligence gathering and social engineering. Particularly, Dane, you have a lot of experience working with us at Gotham Security, running a lot of our social engineering engagements. We really appreciate you joining us. So we're going to be deep diving into all of this. I think, given the fact that this is such an interesting parlor trick, Dennis, maybe we can have you take it away right from the get-go, talking a little bit about what you were able to do.
Sure. Certainly. Um, I debated doing that in the Christian voice, but the delay is so much so. Anyways, besides the points, yes. What this actually is, this is a technique that is commonly referred to as retrieval-based voice conversion. And so, what this actually allows us to do is it's a new AI technique that has come out very recently, and it allows us to take a speaker's voice, given as little as 10 minutes, upwards of 50 minutes of audio, and using that speaker's voice, you can actually train an AI to convert a certain speaker's voice. So, for instance, my voice into that of our wonderful host, Christian Scott. But there are some problems with this very neat technology. For instance, it can be leveraged to bypass, any sort of 2FA solutions. You can obviously phish certain users into doing actions on your behalf as a malicious actor. You might be able to bypass any sort of fun biometric solutions that may exist based on voice. There's a wide variety of what can actually be executed with this sort of attack. And what's really neat is the amount of audio that is required is it's only 10 minutes, and you can get this from a lot of different places. If somebody has an online persona or any sort of online accounts and they post videos of any kind where they're talking in it, you can scrape that data and build it over time. So actually what you're seeing now on the screen, this is actually something where we were able to take the target's voice, and we were actually able to clone it and replicate them speaking a verification code. And in doing that, we're able to actually bypass the biometric voice fingerprint check. So that's just one of the really cool techniques that we can actually use to socially engineer, or in this case, perform a complete bypass of a two-factor biometric authentication method. Christian, was there anything else that you wanted to add maybe onto that?
That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you for that incredible breakdown. And, one of the things that, as you were initially doing this research and we were kind of playing around with it in some of our pen testing engagements, it really kind of dawned on myself of how malicious actors are starting to employ these techniques and will continue to employ these techniques, particularly around the fact that generative AI solutions are becoming more and more easier for malicious actors to obtain and leverage and utilize to really reduce the barrier of entry for conducting very sophisticated attacks. And I can imagine as time goes on that there's less data that's going to be necessary for capturing someone's voice and being able to essentially imitate it and mimic it fairly well in real time. And what that really means is that you could see situations in the future when someone picks up the phone, right? They get some random call and they're like, hello, is anyone there? And they finally hang up. That might be enough information to capture someone's voice fingerprints, so to speak, right? And then emulate them with additional attack vectors by spoofing someone's phone number. After you spoof someone's phone number, you get on the phone with them and you essentially impersonate whomever the target was expecting to pick up the phone and chat with, right? And
If I can
so
interject into this actual talk,
yeah,
this is actively being used. This is actively being used. It is being used currently to mimic the voice of loved ones and pretend that a hostage scenario is going on and that a ransom needs to be paid. This is an
well,
active attack that is live
you,
in the world.
you've seen this. So wait, you've already seen this in the news. You got a
I've
link
seen
right there?
I've read news articles about this. What's happening is they're training on, for instance, they're kids have TikTok. They're training on like TikTok videos from these kids, and then what they're doing is they're calling they're researching, doing some OSINT. They're calling the parents and then having, oh mom, help me, I'm scared, and it sounds just like them. And then they demand a ransom and they say, you go to the cops, we're going to kill her or whatever. It is already being used in the wild, and to your point, it's as AI advances, it's only going to require less and less audio data to train properly.
Yeah, that is an absolutely crazy one. That being all noted, I'm going to chit chat more about generative AI and using that in social engineering more here in a couple moments. But I think what would be really cool is Hallman, usually I bogart all the space and asking all the good questions and whatnot. I know you, as well as Travis, got a couple good questions in your back pocket. So after that parlor trick, I guess let's have you jump into a couple of good ones that you've been meaning to ask Dane.
Oh yeah, for sure. So first of all, Dane is one of our social engineering guys over at Gotham Security, and I've had the pleasure of assisting on a couple of engagements with him, low level ones, things that are good for beginners like me, things like that, emails. But Dane, as you I think one of the big misconceptions people have on social engineering is it's all about, coming in and phishing emails and sending things out and that. But I don't think people spend a lot of time discussing what it takes to set these campaigns up, the reconnaissance that's done, right? Can you walk through like a beginning high level of what you first do to start your social engineering campaigns? I think a lot of people would love to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I do that, I do want to say a couple of quick things to the AI voice. So what's even scarier about that, and hopefully maybe we can get into this a little bit later, is coming from the actual person, the target's phone number is so easy to do. If I can find little Lucy's phone number and then call Lucy's parents, it'll ring as Lucy's phone number. And that is one of the easiest things to do. The other thing too is if I can find out that someone is having a sleepover, they're away at college, it becomes so much more easy to go through those vectors. So without getting too much into the weeds, some of these attacks it's pretty scary to think about because of how easy it is. And then transitioning into how we go about, executing the social engineering campaigns ourselves, there is so much work beforehand. It's all about the prep. And if you think about it with an athlete's mindset, you go into a game that may last. So I'm a big soccer fan. The games last 90 minutes, but before those 90 minutes, you have days and so many months of buildup and training. And similarly, when it comes to social engineering, the campaigns themselves can last 10 minutes to get everything out. Of course, if we're successful, then it extends. But all of that prep work when it comes to finding emails, identifying who's on vacation, identifying who's a great person to impersonate, identifying the different departments that you want to go after. There's so much that goes into it. And that's only one of the steps, because the next step is to actually prep and stage everything so that when you are about to execute, when you're about to enter into that soccer game or whatever it may be, you can get into it with the idea that, okay, I have everything that I need to be successful. Now I just need to go out there and go get it done. So the prep work is the most important part. And of course, the OSINT work is also so very important, because without it, you're potentially going in blind or with partial campaigns. So the OSINT, like a specific department or who you're going to impersonate, it's very key. So those are the first two major steps in getting to actually game day, so to speak.
Yeah, like I said, I was flabbergasted with the amount of prep and setup. I was very naive to it. It took 10, 15 minutes of everything, but then when you sat down and showed me how you did everything, the setup is insane. So thank you for explaining that.
I was about to say, Dane, you really hit the nail on the head there when it comes to planning and preparation work, being really able to understand who your targets are, how do they operate, what are their motives, how do they think, getting into their mindset, and then developing a realistic pretext behind the social engineering campaigns you want to execute is essentially like the 80% of the work, right? And making something realistic and taking it to the next level. Do you want to talk a little bit about more specifically maybe some of the tools that you like to leverage, some of the techniques you like to leverage in those initial phases of open source intelligence gathering, where you kind of look around, how you kind of connect the dots and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll start with the looking around, the OSINT portion. And it's amazing what is free on the internet. And it's basically so easy to obtain information, like LinkedIn, for example. Especially when I go to a profile and they have their phone number within their profile. That may be something that they feel is okay to put out there for potential employers or connections to have. But for malicious actors, it's very easy to obtain that information and use it for malicious purposes. And LinkedIn is only just one social media site. There are so many out there, and so much information can be obtained. Now, when it comes to managing the data, we've talked about this before. Maltego is a great way to get everything kind of mapped out and organized. And then, of course, it wouldn't be social engineering without finding the emails or phone numbers. So there are plenty of good email finder type tools that we leverage. Specifically, a couple that I really like to use is LinkedIn to username. That's a script that we leverage. And then there are tools, some like scrap.io, very helpful in putting those emails together and getting the validation before getting into sending of a campaign. Some of the other tools are free and open source, and even websites. I don't want to give all the secrets away, but there are plenty of people finder sites out there where it's so easy to find someone's phone number, their address, and whatnot. And you take all that together, and you've got a lot of raw data, and then it becomes, how can we manage this going forward? And then from there, it's kind of a manual process and putting the right pieces with the right campaigns. For the campaigns themselves, there are two major tools that we leverage. One is GoFish, super helpful. I think that one may be more commonly known, but there's another tool that we're getting into more, and I think it's one of the premier social engineering tools, and it's Evil Jinx. It looks like Evil Gen X, but it is pronounced Evil Jinx. That is how the creator pronounces it. But it's proxy-based phishing. So, and I'm sure we'll get to this more, but that is the creme de la creme right now, and I'm very much looking forward to, over the next 6 months to a year, really putting that to work.
I'm glad you mentioned those people searcher sites, because some of them are kind of scary. There are a couple of ones that are out there. If you just Google like how to look up someone's phone number and you put my name into it, it will give you my phone number every time. You can text me. I'll probably answer you. I don't love that, but it is out there and it's so easy to find. You're not going to have 100% success rate on getting those phone numbers, but it is stunning how easy it is to collect information in mass.
One of the people finder sites too that we have leveraged in the past now seems to be updated to get a Google Earth screenshot or snapshot of someone's residence. One of the engagements that we did previously, I was seeing potentially where these individuals live, like from Google Earth, it's wild to think that information is freely available. So definitely be cognizant of that. But as for social engineering, it's great.
So, right here, True People Search. There's a lot of, by the way, for everyone who's on with us tonight, there's a lot of crappy resources out there where they got the fake loading bars and all that kind of stuff, right? There's only a couple of really, really good ones, but I always like to use True People Search as an example for somebody and just like put your name in there, put your town that you live in and your state. It'll get some really interesting information, and really then motivates people to want to sanitize that information from the internet, which, if for anyone who doesn't already know, there's a lot of great services out there like Delete Me, OneRep, Aura is another fantastic service out there where you can scrub a lot of that information about your data privacy from these ClearNet data brokers and all that kind of stuff. Also, want to just generally call out and thank you for dropping it in the LinkedIn chat for everybody, Travis. We previously did a fantastic Multigo deep dive. I remember doing this one. It was really, really awesome. Multigo is one of my most favorite tools. It looks really crazy complex at first, and I know that kind of scares people off, but really in that, I want to say 1 hour or so session, it really sets people up with all the fundamentals that they need to really just jump into Maltego and leverage it on a day-to-day basis for open source intelligence gathering, social engineering planning, and then obviously things like cyber threat intelligence and all of that. That being noted, Dane, one of the things we were recently chit-chatting about before, and this was mostly for my edification and clarification and learning, right? So there's Evil Jinx 2, and I think they just released Evil Jinx 3. And one of the really cool things I think that released with the Evil Jinx, I keep messing up, Evil Jinx 3 is the training content. Can you talk a little bit about the training content, some of the resources there, some of the new features, functionality that you've been working with Evil Jinx 3?
Yes, absolutely. And before I get any further, a note to myself is drop the documentation in for Evil Jinx, because the coursework is phenomenal. Going through, the sessions of like learning how to set it up and how to effectively run Evil Jinx v3 is incredible. There is a mastery course available. However, the documentation associated with Evil Jinx, the creators of the program have done an excellent job in explaining everything. It's very well written and can be, very easily followed. So the coursework definitely helps, put it into practice and helps you visualize. But again, the documentation is great. But what Evil Jinx v3 has that Evil Jinx v2 does not is the extended functionality. So one of the items that we were discussing was that when creating a lure, so a URL basically is called a lure. So when I create an active campaign, I have a phishing lure that I will send out. And with Evil Jinx v3, I can alter that lure to look any which way I would prefer. And one of the coolest ways that I've seen in some of the coursework is being able to alter it so it looks like it's a file extension. So you are actively getting a URL to a document. So it makes the campaign that much more believable by just adding in those components to the lure. And Evil Jinx v3 has so much other extended functionality. The core components from v2 and v3 largely still there, but the fishlet, or how you present the proxy, the web page to the target is so much more clean and crisp, and it works excellent. And also with v3, I'm not entirely sure if v2 had it, but there is a development capacity to where you can go onto your local host and test internally before you're ready for the game day. And with that testing capability, you're setting yourself up for success because you know what works and what doesn't. So v3 definitely has a lot of other features that have really bolstered the efficacy of Evil Jinx.
Okay, fantastic. So, for everyone's clarification with us here tonight, Evil Jinx versus something like a Go Fish site that you create. Can you explain just a little bit more specifically the differences of if you just created a site in like Go Fish, which is a fairly standard tool that people use in social engineering, versus Evil Jinx, and some of the like pros or cons, that kind of stuff?
Yes, and I will do my best to hit the major highlights. There are a lot of differences between Go Fish and Evil Jinx, but the main two that I can think of off the top of my head are that Evil Jinx is a proxy-based social engineering tool to where with Evil Jinx, you are not just hosting some static page where someone enters in their username and their password, and then maybe an MFA portion, which I'll get to here in a second. But with Evil Jinx, it's proxy based. So you're actually hosting a version of the real web page. So for instance, let's say we're using Office 365. I'm not just sending a static web page of Office. It looks like Office 365. And then, there's another page behind it. With Evil Jinx v3, it is a proxy based. So you're proxying, what looks like the absolute real web page, and it's phenomenal. The other great asset about Evil Jinx is that it gets to bypassing MFA so much more easily. So with GoFish, I can have that third page for Office 365 and hope that you're using text message based multi-factor authentication. So in another browser, I'll be logging into your Office 365. When you think you are getting the MFA code, you're going to put it into my GoFish page. I'm going to capture that and then log in as you. With Evil Jinx, it takes the guesswork out of it, and it doesn't matter what sort of OTP code you're using. If you're using an authenticator app, it won't capture the code itself, but it will capture the authorization token. Then with a simple cookie editor, I'm able to take your authorization token, not even have to worry about MFA, and then go log in. So it really takes the guesswork, and it takes away that pain and curiosity of, okay, what if they do have MFA set up? And as we grow in security, most organizations require MFA, especially with OTP, like with an app. Even Microsoft is pushing the number matching. So with Evil Jinx, it's so much more helpful at not worrying about, well, how am I going to bypass MFA if I have their username?
Yeah.
Not only is that a great benefit, but something people won't think of until they get on the red team and they have to start doing this is the time you save using something like Evil Engine X versus the time you will spend making a really good static HTML phishing portal is crazy. I have sunk a ton of time into making a few really good portals. They capture MFA, they have CAPTCHA. By God's grace, the CAPTCHA works, and then the domain gets burned. You're like, it's only used for that engagement, and it's just that's sunk time. But those fishlets and even Evil Engine X, like it's way better all the way around. It's easier to use and it's more effective.
Yeah. 100%. Thank you, gentlemen, for really breaking that down with essentially leveraging tools that are reverse proxies with client domain hooking, right? Like Evil Jinx, Modlishka, so on and so forth. And, really just kind of laying it out for everybody. So we have a fantastic guide here about why MFA is important, but also how multi-factor can be bypassed by malicious actors, and then how to further protect an organization's staff from those types of attacks. And at the end of the day, when it comes to some of the defensive controls that an organization can implement beyond regular multi-factor authentication, they should be, to Dan, what you were just highlighting, which is going beyond just 6-digit OTP codes, right? Be it SMS or through the app, right? They should be doing push notification with additional context of the location, right? And reverse number matching, right? So it makes it much more challenging for a malicious actor to intercept that reversed that reverse number there, right? That's not to say it's impossible by any means, but then for really important staff members, particularly ones that have a lot of keys to the castle, really starting to enforce the use of things like FIDO2 keys is going to be helpful. Trying to prevent that initial entry by a malicious actor into the environment. I would also say some other important elements that we tend to recommend to a lot of folks is you really should have, if it's, Azure Active Directory, or if it's something like Okta, using impossible travel detection or velocity behavior detection, and when there is a login attempt from a location it's geographically far away from the original login, where that person could have traversed that distance in that short of a time, right? Block that login, not just alert on it. Alerting is a really good first step. You maybe set that up originally that way, so you can kind of monitor your staff for, as you're deploying out impossible travel and detection and velocity behavior detection, like deploy it out for like a month and watch everybody. But then after that, once you kind of tune it in and dial it in, set up your allow lists for any of your data centers that people are kind of maybe jumping around between, that kind of stuff, then use conditional access policies to block people from being able to log in from non-corporate devices or devices that don't have the appropriate security controls on them, right? And just block anything that's a velocity detection or impossible travel detection violation. Just block it outright and have a notification go right to the security team. So those are some really helpful ways to kind of further lock things down and tighten the screws to things. All that being said, Travis, I know there was a really cool social engineering technique that we've been leveraging a bit more as of late with Microsoft Teams, especially because it's a more novel, I think, like attack vector to use that staff haven't received a lot of end user security awareness training about quite yet. And so being able to leverage that mixed with also some lack of technical security controls in place, things like Microsoft Teams and Slack can be exploited for social engineering. You want to jump into that?
Yeah, there are a couple layers to that. So there's the easy one, which is a malicious actor purchases a domain for a couple dollars, creates a account in Microsoft 365, throws on an E1 license, the cheapest thing you can do, $10, and you have access to Microsoft Teams, right? Those are pretty much the entirety of the prerequisites to do this. So very, very low barrier to entry. Most organizations, and when I say most, I mean it is the default setting, will allow external organizations to send messages to their Teams client. So if you work for, I don't know, Aldi's, someone at Walmart could probably send you a Microsoft Teams message. It'll just say, external on their message to you. That may be the only indicator that it's something a little bit weird, but it should go through if it's a default setting, and that can be changed. Now, what malicious actors are starting to do with more prevalency, and what we're starting to do as social engineers, is leverage that most social engineering and most end user security awareness training is focused on typical phishing. Maybe some of them are starting to talk about smishing with that on your cell phone. Maybe some of them are talking about impersonating domains. I haven't seen one yet that's talking about people impersonating an employee on your help desk that's reaching out to you by Microsoft Teams, telling you there's an issue with your particular workstation, right? That's getting to the next level. And one of the things that malicious actors will do, or that we will do, is we're not going to get a domain that's, crazy, right? Something that's so silly. Like if we were going to target, I don't know, Wendy's, we're not going to buy WEND3YS, right? We're not going to have something silly. Maybe we get Wendy's.support, something that could realistically be an asset owned by that organization, something that looks to most people to be pretty legit. Send messages as that. It really goes through a lot of the noise, and you can start talking to people. You can even do what's called a callback campaign, where we will reach out to them via Microsoft Teams and ask them to call us. In that way, in their mind, it's actually them validating our identity by them calling us.
Yeah,
it can be really exciting. But taking that a step farther, a couple months ago, a different security researcher, and I'm sorry, I do not remember their name. I'll dig up the article posted. And actually, it's an IDOR issue with Microsoft Teams that Microsoft acknowledged but didn't patch yet, where you can actually exploit it with open source tools called, one's called Team Fisher. There's a couple other ones out there right now. And you can actually send files from an external domain, which shouldn't be allowed. And what we've been able to find through our testing is we can actually send fairly malicious executables that would have otherwise been picked up for by Proofpoint or email security controls. And because we're sending it Microsoft Teams to Microsoft Teams, it's inheriting the trust of Microsoft SharePoint, bypassing that completely. Bypassing all of the email security controls, and the only thing you've got left is your endpoint detection and your Microsoft Defender, Carbon Black, something like that. It is a really novel technique that is so far being very, very effective, both for malicious actors and red teamers alike. So it's definitely something to be aware of.
Yeah. 100%. When it comes to also one of the other major social engineering techniques that I've seen leverage for bypassing multi-factor authentication, it goes a little bit beyond reverse proxy and client domain hooking attacks. By the way, I just want to actually double check before I jump into that. I think I saw one quick question actually on Evil Jinx here. So what happens if a scenario with Evil Jinx where the cookies are tied to a single session and invalidated when used twice? You could just set Evil Jinx to automatically intercept the session and not pass the session token forward back to the user, because it's a reverse proxy, right? So the user is requesting it and it's going back, right? Once you have that, don't pass it forward to the user, and there you go. So that could be dependent on what specific SSO solution is someone's leveraging and the settings that they have in place, but that'd probably be the best way for a malicious actor to kind of, quote unquote, get around that. It would, though, fairly kind of throw a pretty obvious red flag to a user, because you would have to redirect them somewhere else or something like that, or it would just not load ever, right? Not too differently than kind of like a burp suite interception, right, of a response or something like that. So that's a really good one. But that being said, going even beyond that, we've been talking about these reverse proxies quite a bit. A really other interesting tool is like Evil No VNC. And so Evil No VNC is essentially a tool that a malicious actor can leverage by, it's really genius and simple, embedding a VNC session into a web browser, in which that VNC session, for all intents and purposes, just has a full screened web browser, right, that's on the other side of the world in a server, right, that you're remoted into. You don't even know it. You don't even see it. It's inception for all intents and purposes, and you can log in and interact with it and all that kind of stuff. And by the time that you have realized that you then, compromised, they can cut your remote session, because it's just VNC. They can cut it for you. The reason why this doesn't get employed as much compared to something like Evil Jinx is because Evil Jinx, at scale, you could try to conduct an attack, right, on 50 users, 100 users or more, right, and intercept do that reversed proxy with the client domain hooking attack and intercept people's session cookies, right, and then just log in as them. But with Evil No VNC, if you go to target 25 users or something like that, that means you have to have 25 VNC sessions that are all of their own specific ID, right? Otherwise, what happens is you have 25 people that all go to the same web page, right? And they're all sharing the same mouse cursor and that kind of stuff. Right? And they're like, wait, something's going on here that's really, really weird. That doesn't make sense. So for anyone who goes to use this in like future social engineering engagements, that kind of stuff, it would be a noob mistake to accidentally use one VNC session when you're targeting multiple individuals. So you want to make sure that you're generating multiple VNC sessions that are unique to each person you're targeting, or do it very, very narrow band, focusing on one individual at a time. That being said, Dane, love to hear a little bit more about in regards to the setting the campaigns up and staging them and having emails go out and whatnot. I know you've worked a lot with GoFish. Is that still one of your favorites for like general phishing pages and like sending out emails, that kind of stuff? Or is there other solutions that you've been looking to leverage or anything like that?
I would say GoFish is still up there currently with one of my favorite solutions for like mass type phishing, because it is a bit longer when it comes to the setup, but it's a little bit more user friendly, so to speak, when it comes to actually executing the campaigns. Now, I will say there are some drawbacks with GoFish, but for the most part, when it comes to mass phishing and sending out of emails, it's definitely it is absolutely doable. And for casting a wide net, GoFish is probably the way to go. Now, there are definitely email sending solutions and other tools that may be out there, but for I guess sticking with what I know, GoFish is it.
It's a solid one. I know I've had the opportunity of leveraging many in the past. The real challenge in the cybersecurity community is there's a lot of open source content, tools, and scripts that get created initially, but the maintenance of them is a bit challenging sometimes.
Yeah.
A lot of the cybersecurity community are folks who are not full-time programmers, and they make something because it was a necessity from their own job or experience. And it's unfortunate to see not as many people contributing and giving back sometimes to these projects and the developers of them and whatnot. So I would always say, anytime where somebody is leveraging an open source tool and you see that the developer has like a on their GitHub page, like buy me a coffee and whatnot. It is really important to support those folks because that's like the backbone, behind our community. And there's so many commercial offerings and solutions out there, but a good amount of them really just repackage an open source solution, put a prettier UI on it, and then call it something new, which is unfortunate. Travis, you had a quick item you wanted to hit on.
I was just going to agree. That is one thing about GoFish. I mean, of all the solutions out there, it works. It works every time. It might not be the prettiest one.
Yeah.
But I've never not had it work in the last few years. Like you turn it on and it's going to do it. I haven't had any dependency issues with it. I don't have any issues with new updates going through. So maybe it's not the top of the line solution for you to use, but it's a good one to learn to have as a backup if you need to quickly pivot. And that will happen to you eventually.
Now, Holman, in your background and expertise, you primarily come from a web application pen testing background, and there is an overlap with that in social engineering quite a bit more than most people realize, because when you do web application pen testing, there's really, is there a security finding or a risk that's associated with something that could impact the underlying infrastructure and compromise data or compromise the underlying infrastructure or confidentiality, integrity, availability systems, that kind of stuff, or something that exposes the users of that application or system to risk, right? Their data getting disclosed, their sessions being able to be hijacked, transactions being authorized on their behalf, that kind of stuff. Would you be able to talk a little bit in regards to when people talk about web pen testing, they're always talking about like cross-site scripting attacks and cross-site request forgery, and you'll see a pen testing report that'll note it like this is possible, but how can someone tie like a cross-site scripting attack or cross-site request forgery or something like that of a weak web application back to a set of social engineering techniques and campaigns that would be employed by someone like Dane?
Oh, sure, absolutely. To beat a dead horse, it's always, everyone always says the cross-site scripting thing, right? With the cookies not having HTTP only on there. That way, you can utilize a call in JavaScript with a document.cookie, and you can steal someone's sessions token in transit. What Dane's talking about with Evil Jinx is he's able to take those cookies then and plug it into what's called a cookie editor, and all he has to do simply is go into any web browser. I use Firefox myself. I have cookie editor. If I catch a cookie that doesn't have HTTP only, and I catch that in transit, I can paste that cookie right into cookie editor, and then just simply refresh the browser, and then I'm you, right? And that's, you get all the credentials, all those things. There's also a couple different lower level that people miss in web apps, which is cache control, right? It should always be set to no store, no fragment, because you don't want to have that cache where somebody else gets on there and then loads it up. So that's a big thing to look out for when you're doing that.
Looks like he dropped immediately.
I put him too much on the spot.
Yeah.
And he was like, I'm out. Now, Holman did let us know that there's some storms passing by and whatnot. So if he drops, that's understandable. So not a problem there. He was starting to get into some really good meat and potatoes, but all that noted, I know that in the domain of generative AI and that kind of stuff, Dennis, I just want to get your thoughts. Are there any other really cool areas that you see evolving over the next like 6 to 12 months where generative AI is going to be leveraged more in social engineering before I, fill in the blanks and all that?
Gosh. So, we talked about this. We actually joked about it a little before the call started. I think another social engineering tactic that could come up is potentially there's now AI generative models that can train on a person's facial data. And there's also, in combination with that, there's also new technology that could probably be and probably will be combined with that's able to take photos of a certain environment and basically generate a geographic map. So it's able to generate some kind of 3D model based on just flat image data. I would say probably what's going to happen is a combination of that technology for scanning sort of the facial structure of a certain target is going to be leveraged with it. And then the real-time mapping. We already have real-time mapping from a flat picture, but we don't have it in the capacity that it generates a 3D model and maps it onto. I think actually that's not true. I think I've seen some game studios doing that, but I don't think it's ready for, the average user to do that just yet.
I thought they already had like an Instagram filter for something like that. Dennis, come on, you should make an Instagram filter.
Good point. But they do have new models that are really, really good at that. So it's going to make it way, way, way more believable than Instagram. Instagram filters or Snapchat filters too are pretty good anyway.
I was about to say, I mean, kind of piggybacking off of what you're noting there, and then what Dane was talking about a little bit earlier. Now, Dane, I know your examples were a little bit more, focused towards like personal individuals and whatnot. But you can imagine if you call somebody up, right, where you spoof a phone number of a billing department, right, and then you're talking as if you're an authorized individual from that particular finance department or team and whatnot. It's now more challenging than ever to detect and block wire fraud attacks. Can you imagine sending a spear phishing email, right, trying to commit wire fraud, changing a bank account number, right, for an upcoming transaction, right? You call folks up from the number that they're expecting, right, with a voice that is what they've talked to in the past, right? And you're like, yeah, this is authorized. I changed the bank account. Do you need anything else? Okay, no, good.
Funny
right?
that you mentioned that has been done as well. So for one of the attacks, so we talked about some of the attacks being like, the ransomware extortion attacks. There was one instance of a voice cloning attack being used to impersonate a bank manager and transfer an amount of funds. I don't remember the amount of funds. I think it was maybe like $100,000 or something, but I remember this happened probably within the last 2 months or so.
Yeah. Now, I will say for everybody that when it comes to generative AI, obviously that's been leveraged for quite a few months now, at least 6 months now, when it comes to things like creating more convincing language and spear phishing emails, SMS phishing, and all that kind of stuff. Reducing the barrier to entry for generating various payloads that can be sent from malicious actors to staff members. Starting to do a lot more of these impersonation attacks. But also, what's really interesting is that malicious actors being able to leverage prompt injection attacks, right? So not too differently than what you can think of as like a SQL injection attack on a database where data is being unintentionally disclosed, and now you can interact with it and leverage it and utilize it, that kind of stuff, or interact enough with a database where you can perform some type of manipulation of data sets or remote code execution, doing that same type of stuff on generative AI solutions where you can unintentionally bypass the security controls, the barriers that have been artificially created around the generative AI to get it to provide information that it really shouldn't be to you because it wasn't able to determine the multi-tenancy user that it was particularly speaking with at that time, right? Or during that opportunity of doing the prompt injection, getting it to perform a set of actions that in most cases and scenarios, those barriers would prevent, which could be interpreted as malicious, like exfiltrating data on your behalf or something like that. So that's something that's just really important to keep in mind. And then I'll just say something that everyone should be very cognizant of that's just been everywhere like wildfire is it's not the large language AI in itself being a problem, but malicious actors really riding the hype train and the fad, which is creating all these malicious lookalike fake websites, apps, and plugins and all that kind of stuff, right? And all these fake GPT plugins and all that. The reason why that's really problematic is because once you install a plugin into your browser, you're really providing it a lot more capabilities than you want it to. And I think this actually gets back into what Holman was just starting to talk about, which is once a malicious actor is able to interact with, let's say, cookies that aren't protected with HTTP only, they can, do quite a bit of lateral movement there. Hallman, sorry about the storms and all that kind of stuff.
I assume Dennis picked up where I left off since we have the same thoughts on these things. So.
Oh no, we switched into him talking about essentially that movie from the 90s, Face Off, right? He was basically talking about the future version of that, with generative AI. So you can pick up where you left off, good sir. No worries.
No, I think you guys picked up on it already with the HTTP only. I know you said it was the scapegoat thing of cross-site scripting, but that's literally what is the most leveraged against. A ton of cookies out there are just misset. They're missing the secure flags. They're missing same sites on there. They're missing HTTP only. And the cool thing about HTTP only is when it's set, it literally makes the cookie not able to be transmitted in a string. It just gives you an empty set. That's it, right? And if it's not there, it boom, pops right out. Malicious actor gets it. They utilize what Dane was using, cookie editor, copy, paste, refresh your browser, and you are essentially that person. You have access to all their things. And the scary part is you access their caches as well on some sites that store on the end if they don't have those no pragma sets on no cache, which we classify, as a finding, albeit sometimes informational, sometimes low. It depends on the kind of impact that it has on the site. But those are what we leverage on the web app side that you can actually utilize for social engineering. So, but I did have a segue into another question, if that was
100% good, sir.
Awesome, perfect. I walked in, you guys talking about AI, right? So, and of course, Dennis's voice change with this as the Cyber Judo began was a cool, neat trick. So as we grow in technology, right, as quantum computing gets closer and closer, things like that, and I know we've seen it in our emails, it's the telltale signs there of malicious actors sending out phishing is getting a lot better, right? There's no more misspellings, there's no crazy, domains like you were saying before, like a crazy E out of nowhere. And as AI gets more and more sophisticated, we're going to see that grow. And I'm just wondering, curiosity, and Dennis, I'll throw this to you because you've been kind of following AI a lot. I know, Christian, you have the LML and the language models as well. Where do you guys foresee, malicious actors, let's say 2 or 3 years from now, utilizing phishing?
Well, I would say it's already in use. It's already in the wild. I think it's only going to be used more commonly from there. That's not to discredit the traditional tactics. Traditional tactics have their place. They will still be effective as much as they have been in the past, I feel. But as far as AI goes, definitely it's going to be leveraged more. I think it's absolutely going to be leveraged more. I would say, interestingly enough, I did see this the other day. I think Intel is working on developing some technologies to be able to detect some of the face swapping algorithms that are out there. And that's probably going to be more common, I would imagine, over the next couple of years as it gets picked up and it is more relevant. You're probably going to see a lot of large companies. Intel's doing it now, and NVIDIA may pitch their hat in. There may be another contender that comes up, some sort of, freelance, or not freelance, but startup tech company that decides to throw their hat in the ring for detection of AI generated content for voice and face. I would say it's probably going to get more relevant or more utilized. It's going to be more utilized over time. There's going to be, techniques that are going to be used to try and combat it. I think it's just natural progression. It is very, very good at the moment to tricking humans, and it'll only get better.
Yeah, there's certainly that predator-prey relationship that always occurs where, you have your ebbs and flows over time of malicious actors leveraging a set of techniques, and then how the defenders then adapt and create proactive controls. And then, there's some way to then circumvent it, right? So I think this is a natural process, but the certainly generative AI for impersonating voices and faces, trying to bypass biometrics and all that kind of stuff, I think is going to become more and more commonplace. The barrier to entry is going to be reduced, which means that, to Dennis's point, organizations are going to have to learn how to adapt. Probably the first thing that they're going to have to employ in that process is solutions that are being created by various commercial off-the-shelf vendors, who have a solution fighting AI with AI. That's always going to be in itself its own little race there. I would really see probably cryptographic identity proofing becoming a really big thing. So, I used to leverage this tool a lot more in the past with communicating with people. I use it less as of late. It's called Keybase, right? So like everyone's familiar with like Signal and Telegram. Session is one of my favorites because it doesn't require you to have a phone number with it, which I think is very creepy. And if your phone number gets compromised, you don't have to worry about somebody trying to impersonate you on Telegram or Signal. But nonetheless, so Keybase was a end-to-end encrypted solution. Actually, it still exists and whatnot. They were purchased by Zoom a couple of years ago. But end-to-end encryption for chats and even actually sharing end-to-end encrypted GitHub or Git repositories amongst developers and all that kind of stuff. It was really cool, but its primary objective was not necessarily right from the get-go end-to-end encryption with perfect forward secrecy and all that, which it does have, very neat. It was all about identity proofing the first, right? Of like, hey, you know that I'm this key-based person, that I'm legit, because here's my Twitter handle, it's been verified. Here's my GitHub that's been verified. Here's my website that's been verified, right? And those are cryptographically provable and unbroken, so you know it's actually me. I think we're going to have to return to a place of doing a lot more of that in the future. Things, especially when it comes to bank transactions, where somebody's going to be changing bank account details, I think in the future will require some type of cryptographic proofing of really are you who you say you are here. And I cannot use my eyes, I can't use my ears, to really identify that anymore. I need a computer to really help me in that process.
I would also add
Absolutely.
on to that, if you don't mind discussing some of the mitigation techniques potentially for these voice cloning and face cloning sort of things. Is that fun to dive a little bit into, Christian, you think?
Yeah, if you got some items in your back pocket for mitigation techniques, I'd love to hear
Sure.
more about it.
Very well, they're very simple, but I feel that to put it in your terms, I would be remiss if I didn't mention any sort of way to combat some of these techniques. To the point that you just made, obviously having identity verification is going to be a big factor. This can be implemented in kind of like a makeshift way at the moment. For instance, in the case of these child extortion attacks, where they pretend that they've kidnapped a child.
Yeah.
One great mitigation to prevent this sort of thing: have some kind of code word, have some kind of secret that that you and the other party knows, and then just say, okay, what's the code word or whatever. And supposing that they don't know the code word, then it's probably not that.
Don't use pineapple. For some reason, 90% of people choose pineapple as their first passphrase with other people. Don't do that. Okay, continue, good sir.
Yes, it ties back to the old TV series Psych, but certainly yes, having some sort of code phrase. It's not as funny as it sounds. It's not a bad idea, even for the modern era. If you need some kind of solution, you could have some kind of secret that's kept between team members if necessary. Just having that is going to make it much harder for any sort of impersonation over probably over phone at the moment, just because the face technology is almost there but not quite. Just having simple passphrases or things like that are going to be a pretty good mitigation if someone tries to impersonate another user. For the time being, of course. Eventually, I don't disagree with Christian. I think eventually it is going to move into, having some kind of cryptographic authentication. I know YubiKeys have been around for a little while, but their cost is quite cheap. But I know that it is just a pain to try and get organizations, especially smaller to medium-sized ones, to justify buying YubiKeys for every single employee, and they don't see the need in it. There are other solutions that are coming about. I've seen 1Password, I think, is trying to push for passwordless authentication. Things like that are going to be interesting to see how that is integrated. Christian? Yeah.
So, I'm going to play devil's advocate. I'm going to be a pain in the butt here. I think passphrases shared amongst individuals is not necessarily a bad idea at first, right? But I will say that is highly reminiscent of when people have secret question answer pairs, right? And getting past those, not based on the fact, just by the way, that people put that information out there, but if you collect enough information about somebody, you'll be able to statistically identify what types of passphrases they would like to use. Like, you guys could probably guess some good passphrases that I would want to use in my family, because you know my personality type pretty well. I think any malicious actor who does really, really good dossier work might be able to pretext it. That being noted, I mean, there are solutions out there that exist for us right now. Like, for example, PGP, and it has have a PGP key, right? And that's multi-factor, by the way. So it's something that you need to have. The private key. You need to have the password to access the private key, right? And sign your messages, right? If you have your emails signed, right, then that means that the malicious actor didn't just compromise your mail account, but but they somehow got access to your computer, got the PGP private key, right? And they stole your password at the same time, right? That's not to say that's not defeatable on its own self. It is,
And
right?
that does go back to having good process as well. You
Yeah.
have to have a good process, especially for critical actions. For instance, bank account transfers. You do need to have a process defined. Oh, you called me over the phone. You want to transfer $100,000? Sorry, the process is you have to send me a signed PGP email. That's just the way that it is. Having good processes defined for that sort of thing is going to make it much harder for a malicious actor to socially engineer. Just in general, across the board. That's typically how it goes.
Now, if just people could teach their accounts payable and their accounts receivable teams how to use PGP, that would solve the world's problems and wire fraud attacks. Now, but so those again are some good starting mitigation recommendations. With anything that is ever evolving, the mitigation recommendations are going to be the same way and trying to think outside the box. A good, like, for example, mitigation recommendation, when people talk about like password managers, which I know is a slight tangent, but it's still in the domain of talking about social engineering in the sense of like stealing people's credentials, right? A lot of people are say, well, I don't trust a password manager like 1Password or LastPass. Understandably so, because hey, it stores my stuff in the cloud and all that. So what if they get compromised and then my passwords get stolen? And I would say for most people who are not really that good at remembering long strings of digits and characters, the password manager is going to usually be more secure than yourself and whatnot. And still, if you're hedging your risk, an online password manager is not perfect, but it's going to be more helpful. Obviously, there's a ton of fantastic offline solutions, but generally speaking, one of the ways to actually mitigate it that is not a crazy one is when you go to store your passwords in a solution like 1Password, store only a fraction of the password there, right? The whole generative part, right, that's completely random that you don't remember, store that in 1Password, and then, append a 5 digits at the end or 5 characters at the end that only you know. Bing, bada, boom, right? This way, a malicious actor, even if they compromise 1Password, they have to figure out what you've been using, right, to append at the end of everything too. And they have to go independently go find that from other data sets of compromised passwords everywhere else and tie that together, which is not impossible by any means, but much more challenging at that point. So there are some like little things like that where someone can really improve their defense in depth kind of processes for themselves. That being noted, I know we only have a couple minutes left here. Travis, you've done quite a bit of social engineering in the past with me, as well as some with Dane and all that kind of stuff. And I wanted to open this up to you in regards to what is one of the biggest misconceptions you think people have, generally speaking, when you talk about social engineering or open source intelligence gathering, either from the perspective of, let's say, a customer or clientele, or the perspective of someone who's looking to get more into cybersecurity? What's the biggest misconception you encounter?
That your organization is too small to worry about it.
Yeah.
For sure. I definitely see a lot of clientele will have on the smaller side that think because they've got 10 people, they've got 15 people, they're somewhat immune to it. And in a little bit of a logical sense, sure, they are. If you've got 9 people in your office, you all work in the same room, and I call up as Bill, and I don't sound like Bill, you're gonna know it's not Bill because you go golfing with Bill, But that doesn't mean that you're above being targeted by it by any means. And we've had success with targeting small organizations, social engineering, just as much as a large organization. But in the last couple of minutes, I'd be really curious to hear Dane's thoughts on something we haven't touched on, which is anytime we make these campaigns for social engineering, we have to get them approved, right, by our point of contact, by the project, whoever running the project. What are some tips you have on how to effectively communicate what you're trying to do so that they, maybe a non-technical person, understands and can explain that to the people on their side without causing any panic and making sure that the test goes on effectively?
So like the project management process and communication.
Yeah.
With customers. That's a really good one. Yeah, Dane.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. It's I think going to be a little difficult to explain because it's nuanced to the organization and knowing who your approver is. Is it someone who works in the finance department who doesn't know much about the technical and how social engineering works aside from, I get, spam emails that try to get me to sign up for a $40 Amazon gift card? or is it someone who is in the IT department who is very well versed and understands? So I think that's step number one, is knowing the target audience. And then, of course, once it gets translated into like the C-suite, how are they going to understand it? So it is making it a bit easy to understand while also getting the critical details to whomever the approver is. Because once the critical details are understood, like, hey, we're targeting this department on this day with this tactic, that is at least your approval to start. And then once, there's any compromise, you take it from there. But the critical details with the most clear and concise language, I think, is important. And of course, knowing your target audience.
Right. It should be a surprise to the targets, not a surprise to your point of contact.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. I'll also say that, so Dane, you and the rest of the team do a fantastic job that when we're engaging in social engineering campaigns, that once we start to gain a foothold into a particular user's account or into an environment in that process, it's really important every step of the way to communicate with your point of contact of what you've done, what you're currently doing, what's happening next, because there may be some artifacts that you're generating as we're simulating a malicious actor where the blue team's going to see that and they're going to start to panic, or they may not. But nonetheless, making sure that your point of contact doesn't just approve the social engineering campaigns, but every step of the way they know what's going on, so nobody panics in the process. And at any given moment, if they start to feel uncomfortable, they can pull the kill switch and say, hey, okay, let's stop right here. We're good. We don't need to do any more. You've proven the point of that a malicious actor can really dig this far into the layers of the organization. That being said, Dan, is there anything else you wanted to follow up on the tail end of that?
No, I think that's spot on. It's important to remember at the end of this session, I think, we do this, to improve, to help, foster the security of organizations through the personal lens. So it's important to just remember that, at the end of the day, if a campaign needs to be killed, we'll absolutely pull the plug, because we're doing this not to be the ones who are, taking, secrets and whatnot from an organization, but teaching them how to defend themselves. And I think although social engineering, it has a very, kind of scary tune to it, and can, do a lot of damage to organizations, it can do a lot of great for, teaching organizations how to best prepare themselves for something like that.
Stupendous. Everyone, really appreciate you providing this fantastic insight tonight. And I also appreciate all of our attendees joining us tonight and soaking it all up and asking good questions and contributing in the comments and all that kind of stuff. I just want to call out one last item for everybody here. Again, if you didn't get the opportunity to see Dennis doing the voice impersonation with me in the beginning, make sure you go check that out. It'll be posted to YouTube fairly shortly as well. And I'm just going to say this. Hey, even if you're not looking to do social engineering for a living, you're not going to be on the red team side or anything like that, at least now you have a really fantastic April Fool's prank for somebody, right? Now you just need to record their voice, right? Call them up in the middle of the night. Make sure that you call from a phone number that was one of their previous cell phone numbers or something like that. And then say, hey, John, this is you from the future. I need you to do this. Listen, be sure not to go there, okay? I just want to let you know. It's always really creepy when someone hears their own voice telling them that there's something bad that's going to happen in the future. Just kidding. Don't do that. Anyways, team, thank you so much for your time again. Really appreciate it. Everyone have a fantastic night. Bye now.